Number 8. The lipstick of the damned. You grab your favorite tube of lipstick, give it a twist, and apply a perfect coat of crimson. You're feeling confident, beautiful, and ready to take on the world. But what if that vibrant red is a subtle nod to a history far more sinister than you could ever imagine? The origin of lipstick, particularly in its more vibrant shades, isn't about glamour and beauty. It's about poison. For centuries, across various cultures, women used makeup, including a kind of rudimentary lipstick, that contained some truly terrifying ingredients. We're talking about things like vermilion, a pigment made from mercury sulfide, and a white lead powder that was famously used in the facial creams of the Elizabethan era. These were not ingredients for the faint of heart. The mercury and lead seeped into the skin, causing a variety of health problems, from hair loss and tooth decay to nervous system damage and even death. In ancient Egypt, Cleopatra was said to have used a pigment derived from crushed beetles to create her iconic red lip color, a practice that, while less toxic, still points to a very raw, very messy origin. So the next time you put on a bold, classic red lip, remember, you're not just wearing a product. You're participating in a ritual that for a very long time was a slow, deliberate form of self-poisoning. You're basically celebrating your ancestors' ability to not die from their own makeup. Number 7. The horrors of your favorite candy. Imagine a world where your favorite sugary snack wasn't a treat, but a tool for public shaming and punishment. Believe it or not, the origins of many candies trace back to some surprisingly dark places. Take, for example, the concept of hard candy. In the early days, sugar wasn't just a food item. It was a rare and valuable commodity used by apothecaries and alchemists. They would mix it with various herbs and spices to create what were essentially medicinal pills, meant to cure everything from a sore throat to a bad mood. But here's the twist. The same mixture was often used as a form of social control. If you were a child who misbehaved, you might be given a hard, bitter candy that was meant to taste terrible as a form of punishment. The sweet ones were a rare reward, a stark contrast to the sour, medicinal versions used to keep you in line. And it gets weirder. The original form of a lollipop was essentially a tool to make medicine go down easier, a sugar-coated spoonful of yuck. The name lollipop is even rumored to have come from the word lolly, meaning tongue, and pop, meaning slap, referring to the act of a parent slapping a sweet treat into a child's mouth. So while you're unwrapping that chocolate bar or unwinding with a handful of gummy bears, remember that their ancestors were more likely to be found in a medicine cabinet or used to scold a naughty child. Your modern-day treat is a ghost of its former, more unpleasant self. Number 6. The terrifying toothbrush. You reach for your toothbrush every morning and night, a simple tool of hygiene. It's a comforting ritual, but the toothbrush, as we know it, has a surprisingly unhygienic and disturbing origin. Before the plastic and nylon bristles we use today, toothbrushes were a gruesome affair. The first mass-produced toothbrush was invented in the late 1700s by an Englishman who, after being thrown in jail for debt, realized that scrubbing his teeth with a rag and soot wasn't very effective. His solution? He took some leftover animal bone from a guard's dinner, drilled some holes in it, and used bristles from the hair of a Siberian hog. He literally glued pig hair to a bone and called it a toothbrush, and that was a vast improvement. Before that, people would use everything from frayed twigs to porcupine quills. But even with the pig hair brush, hygiene was still a foreign concept. The brushes were rarely cleaned and were often shared. They were breeding grounds for bacteria, and brushing your teeth was less about cleanliness and more about a slightly less gross form of putting animal hair in your mouth. So the next time you use your soft-bristled, bacteria-resistant toothbrush, take a moment to be thankful you don't have to put a bone covered in hog hair in your mouth twice a day. Basically, your dental hygiene has come a long way from the Stone Age of sanitation. Number 5. The heels of history. You put on a pair of high heels, and you instantly feel taller, more confident, maybe even a little more powerful. But those heels you're wearing were never meant for you. In fact, they were never even meant for walking. The origins of the high heel are less about fashion and more about function, specifically a function that involved hacking up dead animals. We're talking about Persian butchers in the 10th century. They would wear a heeled shoe to elevate their foot, keeping it out of the blood and grime on the slaughterhouse floor. The heel also provided stability when they were swinging a heavy cleaver, making it easier to do their grisly work without slipping. Butchers aren't the only ones to credit for this bizarre footwear. Fast forward a few centuries to the Persian cavalry. Soldiers wore heels to keep their feet from slipping out of the stirrups while riding, giving them better leverage to shoot their bows and arrows. It was a purely practical, masculine piece of military gear. When Persian delegates visited Europe in the 17th century, their heels caught the eye of the French aristocracy. The nobility, always on the lookout for new ways to flaunt their status, adopted the heels as a symbol of wealth and power. They were useless for walking, so wearing them proved you didn't have to do any real work. So the next time you're teetering around on a pair of stilettos, remember you're wearing footwear that was once the domain of butchers and bow-wielding soldiers. You're basically walking on a legacy of chopped meat and military might. Number 4. The accidental cushion. It's a universal truth. You can't help but pop bubble wrap. That satisfying little pop is a joy, a stress reliever, and a perfect little moment of simple pleasure. But the fact that this glorious invention even exists is a complete, utter accident. It was never intended to be packaging, or a toy, or a source of ASMR for a generation of bored humans. Bubble wrap was born in 1957 when two engineers, Al Fielding and Mark Chavans, were trying to invent a new kind of textured wallpaper. They sealed two plastic shower curtains together, trapping air bubbles in between, and called it 3D plastic wallpaper. It was a complete and total failure. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted to wallpaper their house with bubble wrap. Not to be deterred, they tried to market their strange invention again, this time as greenhouse insulation. After all, it had little pockets of air, so it must be good at trapping heat, right? Wrong. That also went nowhere. They were on the verge of giving up on their absurd creation when a marketing genius at Sealed Air Corporation realized their 3D plastic wallpaper could be used to protect fragile items during shipping. It was a stroke of absolute desperation that turned a triple failure of a product into a multi-billion-dollar business. So every time you pop a sheet of that glorious plastic, remember that you're celebrating the triumph of failure and the accidental success of some really terrible wallpaper. Number 3. The bear that almost didn't exist. You've probably got one sitting on a shelf somewhere. A cute, cuddly, fluffy teddy bear. It's a timeless symbol of comfort and childhood. A simple, sweet toy with an equally simple origin story, right? Wrong. The teddy bear's story is a surprising mix of a failed hunting trip, political drama, and journalistic creativity. In 1902, President Theodore Teddy Roosevelt was invited on a bear hunting trip in Mississippi. The trip was, to put it mildly, a disaster. Roosevelt, a seasoned hunter, hadn't managed to bag a single bear. To save him from embarrassment, his hosts cornered and tied up a bear cub for him to shoot. Roosevelt, an avid sportsman, found the act of shooting a helpless tied-up bear to be completely unsportsmanlike and refused to do it. A political cartoonist named Clifford Berryman heard the story and drew a cartoon of Roosevelt turning his back on the bear cub. The cartoon was published in a newspaper and became an instant sensation. At the same time, a New York shopkeeper named Morris Mictum, inspired by the cartoon, created a small stuffed bear toy in honor of the president's act of kindness and called it Teddy's Bear. He sent a bear to the president, who was so taken with the toy that he gave Mictum permission to use his name. And just like that, the teddy bear was born. So your beloved childhood toy isn't just a stuffed animal, it's a memento of a president's compassion, a journalist's cleverness, and a failed hunting trip. It's a little piece of political history you can hug. Number 2. The dangerous ear cleaner. You've just stepped out of the shower, and you grab that little paper stick with a poof of cotton on each end, the humble cotton swab or Q-tip. You're about to do what everyone knows you're not supposed to do. Clean the inside of your ear. You probably think this is a benign, straightforward tool, but its origins are surprisingly grim. The Q-tip was invented in the 1920s by a man named Leo Gerstenzang. His wife was trying to clean their baby's ears by wrapping a wad of cotton around a toothpick. Gerstenzang, horrified by the danger, was inspired to invent a safer, more sanitary alternative. His original product was called baby gaze, and it was essentially a piece of wood with cotton on the ends. So while the modern Q-tip was born out of a father's protective instinct, its creation came from a desperate and frankly dangerous hack. The irony is that even with Gerstenzang's innovation, doctors still advise against sticking anything in your ear canal, as it can push wax further in and cause damage to your eardrum. The very object invented to make cleaning a baby's ears safer is now a tool that millions of people misuse every day, risking the very health they're trying to maintain. You're basically celebrating an invention that came from a mistake by making the same mistake its creator was trying to prevent. Number 1. The bloody tea table. Think about your living room for a second. The centerpiece of it all is probably that coffee table, the flat surface where you put your drinks, your remote controls, and your feet after a long day. It's an unassuming, universal piece of furniture. But this seemingly innocent object is a literal and symbolic relic of colonial-era violence and power. The coffee table, as we know it today, didn't exist in European homes until the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was introduced by the British Empire after their bloody colonization of Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka. The British were obsessed with a new drink, tea. The tea tables used in Ceylon were low to the ground to accommodate the local custom of sitting on cushions. The British brought this concept back home, where it was initially a bizarre foreign curiosity. But over time, as tea became a massive part of British culture, the tables became a staple. The coffee table is a direct result of British imperialism, a piece of furniture that was introduced to the world on the backs of colonial exploitation and the violence it took to acquire the resources like tea that made it so popular. So every time you set your mug on that polished wood, remember that it's a piece of furniture with a history of spilled blood, not spilled coffee.